Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is poker player, teacher, and computer analyst Nick Howard. We'll be talking to Nick shortly. On a show a month or so ago, Richard responded to the question of where is the best place in Las Vegas to play blackjack. I get that question all the time, except the question to me is about video poker. This is the answer I generally give. There will never be one unique answer to where's the best place to play video poker. What stakes do you play? If you want good nickel games, you need to look somewhere else than for good $5 games. What games do you know how and play? Nobody knows every video poker game. I can play 8 or 10 at the professional level without reviewing, but I could get up to speed on others fairly quickly. There's more than 100 different video poker variations out there. Nobody knows them all. It does you no good to know which casino has the best Joker poker if that's not a game you play. Do you already have points or status at one system, and are you close to another tier level? For example, if you're already close to 7 stars in the Caesar system, and this might be your last trip of the year, you should probably play at a Caesar's property. Will you have other people in your party who value other things like shopping or childcare or bowling or movie theaters or rodeos? Where are you planning to sleep? If you're staying at the M, which is at the south end of the strip, you shouldn't even consider the games at Aliante, which is 30 miles away. Do you have an offer from one casino? If that casino gives you $500 to show up, and you are planning to play only $5,000 coin in, that casino has the best video poker. No casino would be 10% better than that. Where are you welcome to play? Many of us have casinos that don't appreciate our business. So that's a factor. Is a no smoking section important to you? You get the idea. Even if you could answer all of these questions, don't expect me to have up-to-date information for you. Yes, I scout, but I'm scouting for me. And my desired parameters are almost certainly different than yours. And even if they were the same, there's likely to be only 1 or 2 good machines in a casino, and I'm not very interested in creating more competition for those machines. The website, vpfree2.com, is a good place to start. It lists the best video poker games in most casinos in the country. The information isn't 100% perfect, but it's fairly close, and it beats starting from scratch. Any comments on this, Richard?
No, it's exactly the same in probably any game. I'm sure Nick would give us the same answer talking about where are the best live poker games in Las Vegas. I mean, every game is like that.
All right. Let's talk to Nick.
Hey, guys.
Nick Howard has been playing poker for more than 10 years. He studied game theory with Matt Jonda and contributed to Jonda's book, Applications of No Limit Hold'em. He's a coach on runitonce.com. Nick Howard, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me.
So where are the best games in Las Vegas, Nick?
Well, I haven't played live in Vegas since probably last summer, but around that time it was pretty interesting to see guys kind of jumping around, trying to find a 5-10 game or higher. I remember Venetian wasn't doing that well with supporting the 5-10 games. Aria had a pretty nice one that ran every night till about midnight. It's a weird thing. Unless you're playing really high, there's some private games like, in Aria and Bellagio. But, I mean, you can always find a 2-5 or a 1-2 game anywhere, and they're usually pretty soft. People are drunk.
There are private games in Aria and Bellagio? I didn't know that they were allowed to have private games.
Well, you know what I mean, just like behind the glass where you have to be a superstar or an invite to sort of get into it.
Oh, I didn't realize that was a thing. I thought by law they had to be open to anybody who wanted to sit down if there's a seat open.
I guess I mean they're open, but we all don't have $50,000 to sit at it.
Yeah. All right. Now, Nick Howard, you've said somewhere that it's your contention most poker players are not getting any better, which seems strange given the number of books and videos that are being sold. Why do you say this?
I think it kind of depends where you look first. Like if you took somebody who's completely new and you set them up with like the basic books, Doyle Brunson, like all the stuff that we know, there's definitely a learning curve that he'll get on there and he'll get better. But when you head into environments like Run It Once, where guys are buying memberships and they're a little bit ahead of the curve, I think what starts to happen is that you get like diminishing marginal returns on your study habits. A lot of guys in Run It Once got very obsessed with the theory approach since these solvers came out. I'll talk about them in a little bit, but basically these solvers can apparently solve everything or close to everything, enough to confuse people a lot. There's a lot of different ways that you can think you're doing something very smart when studying them, but it's very hard to implement the things that you're looking at because it's so complex. So guys end up studying a lot and then not getting much back in terms of implementation. And I think that's where a lot of the community is stuck, is that they think that they're doing a lot more for their game than they are, because they're at a level where they have to start studying more complex tools, but they're not able to create a context around it, and it hurts them. So like I said, like it depends where you look. Like for a newbie, yeah, he's going to get better if he reads basic books, but there'll come a point where he needs to study something more complex, and I don't think that there's enough of a context for advanced level training for most guys to be able to piece it together themselves. And that's why I think guys are pretty much struggling.
Is that true even at the lower levels like 2.5 and 5.10?
Well, it depends if you're talking live poker or online poker, because 5.10 live, I mean, it's no hard game pretty much anywhere you go. 5.10 live might be equivalent to 200 no limit, like 1-2 no limit on PokerStars. So I think if we set it more in like, once you become an intermediary player, let's put it that way, I think that you're challenged to start to look for books outside of, everything that we grew up with, like, the beginner stuff and like, the Doyle stuff, which is more almost like entertainment, in my opinion, like at this stage. And when that happens, you either pick up a program like PO Solver and try to figure it out, or you stagnate. The interesting thing is the guys that have picked up the solver programs haven't really quite figured out how to use them, so they're still stagnating anyway. And I feel like that's sort of the threshold we're at.
Can you explain what the solver programs do?
Solver programs basically allow you to run a simulation that solves for all the correct decisions for each hand at any point in the hand. For each hand you could hold, it'll tell you what to do with it if you just input the two pre-flop ranges that the guys are playing and the board, like the board texture. So technically you can solve for pretty much anything. It's just that the complexity of the solutions are such that nobody can really implement them accurately. And I think it's the main thing that guys get sort of spun out on, is everybody's putting time into looking at the solutions, and then everybody goes back to the table thinking that they can implement things way more accurately than they can. In a lot of ways, it forces guys to play worse, because they forget what they knew as far as their intuition and their gut, and they're so spun out trying to do the game theory optimal thing that they sort of just lose control over their thoughts, and I think their decision-making process just suffers from it. So the whole thing with like the scaling of the solver bubble, like the first one to come out was GTO Range Builder. That was at the end of 2014. My guys in my Skype group, like a couple of close friends, were a beta testing team on that program. Basically, we helped it detect bugs as it was approaching its major release. And around that time, like early 2015, 2 other solvers were coming out. So it's sort of known as the solver bubble. One of them was faster, and that's the one that's sort of like the big one now. It's called PO Solver. So that one sort of has a monopoly, I would say, over the industry. And it's got everybody's attention, but not a lot of people have shown that they can use it efficiently. Sort of the paradox of intermediate to advanced poker right now is it seems like we have this dream machine except it's so complex that people are struggling to generate a context around it and implement it efficiently.
So the person that solves that problem is going to make a quantum leap above the crowd, I think, then.
I don't know if you're leading me in here, but basically what I tried to do as I sort of started to realize that this was a problem that was going on for 2 years or so since the bubble burst, and now heading into 2017. I went through the ringer with the same problem, really over applying myself in the direction of the solvers in an over analytical way, and finally I came to the conclusion that the problem was that we were trying to do too much with them. Like, more is not more when it comes to these things, because you just end up getting so overwhelmed. So I started to look for clever ways to try to simplify certain strategies and make them a little bit more bearable to go back to the table and implement something that you could actually wrap your head around. So there's some resistance to that in the community, because it gets a rep for maybe being the easy way out. But I think that if simplification is done correctly, it's actually more advanced, because it's integrating higher levels of sight, like higher levels of vision, and it's actually like a lot more humble. Like, I know that I'm sacrificing quote unquote accuracy in the sense that I'm not following the solver solutions exactly, but I'm still gaining accuracy in the sense that nobody else is implementing anything properly either. Like, everybody just thinks that they can look at a solution, memorize it, and go implement it. I'm more concerned with condensing things and coming away with pattern recognition, certain themes that you can actually pull up. Like, you can actually like sit down at the table, remember what you studied, and get a takeaway from it that day. That's what I really like. Is like when a guy can study for an hour, go to the table and play, and feel like he's implementing something that he studied that day. I never really started to have that feeling until I started simplifying my work with the solvers. So that's sort of my direction that I'm heading in, is like I'm really trying to simplify everything, because it's really painful to go down the over analytical path with something that's as overwhelming as these things are.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, it may be kind of a simplistic analogy, but I'm often asked about more complicated card counting systems, and I've always said that I think the simpler is better, because the more complicated it is, the less time you can play it effectively, and the more mistakes you're going to make. So I agree. It makes a lot of sense to me what you're saying.
I mean, complexity is only as good as your ability to replicate it. Like, it's one thing if you find a solution, it's another thing to be able to put it into action. I think people need to be a little bit more humble about what they're actually capable of, and that will allow them to scale their growth accordingly. Like, maybe a year or two down the road, I'll use the solvers a little bit more deliberately, but I'm on a learning curve too, and I have to say that like to take relevant steps from a simplified starting point, that's been the real wake-up call for me in the learning process. Is like, it's important to be able to know that you're scaling your growth daily, and to be able to feel that tangibly, you know what I mean? As opposed to just all this over-analysis and hypothesizing. You got to get in there and start putting everything into action and seeing how it's sort of taking shape for you.
In video poker, we've come to somewhat the opposite conclusion for an interesting reason. In video poker strategies, we have what we call a basic strategy, which would get you to 99.9% accuracy, and then we have a penalty card strategy, which gets you the rest of the way. Many players, many successful players, have come to the conclusion that it's better to do the basic strategy of 99.9 that you can get accurately reasonably quickly, and that getting that extra 1/10% is just too little for too hard. And some of it, and I actually take the opposite tact of, for many games, that 1/10% is doable by people of a certain level of intelligence, and the edge we deal with is so small that you have to pick it up. So part of it has to do with how smart you are and how
I
how
think what
good you are.
it has to do with about knowing yourself, knowing what your capacity is. Like if you're not being honest about being able to implement that extra 0.1% or whatever it was that you called it,
Yeah.
you're really hurting yourself there. Like, this is the problem. Very few guys know themselves well enough with a level of humility to know if they fall in one category or the other. And I think a lot of guys are outside of their capacity, and it's hurting them. It's like nobody ever wants to go back to doing something more simple because it seems like a step in the wrong direction. But that's something I feel so strongly about, like, for scaling growth, is that you have to be humble enough to know where you're at currently in order to scale.
For your students, certainly brighter ones pick up things faster than not so bright ones.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there must be some intermediate poker players who just do not have the mental tools to go on. No matter how much time they spend studying, they're just never going to be among the elite players. That has to be true in every game.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a certain level of intangible, natural magic, whatever you want to call it, or just guys who are sharper that, learn faster and have more balanced perspectives in general. I do think that there's a certain level that you can train someone. Like someone asked me this today. A student said he's a stock guy, and he was asking me, do you think I should quit to play full time? Are the games beatable? And I said, like, even if you're not a natural, the games are beatable enough that I could teach you how to beat, mid-stakes NL, even if you're not supposed to do this, even if this isn't your destiny. You know what I mean? There's a certain capacity you can train someone to, even if they're not all that bright. A lot of it is just discipline. I tell my friends this who have, like, bartending jobs in Vegas. You guys could get off work, go sit sober at a Vegas casino for 4 hours, and just, like, make $20 an hour scooping pots off of drunk guys. So, like, there's always going to be a market for guys who have discipline, and I don't think the level that you have to get to is all that high before you can be a winning poker player, especially in live poker. It's just about whether or not you actually want to jump into that and quit your job and all that. I mean, that's a big choice for a lot of people. That's a big risk for your security, especially guys with families and all that.
We go through exactly those same questions in blackjack and video poker, and people really underestimate the discipline required to actually force yourself to be your own boss and get out there and force yourself to go out and put in the hours and get in the time. I think with poker, there's the additional hurdle of when you learn to play blackjack or video poker, there is an absolutely correct play and an incorrect play, and it's known. Whereas in poker, you could be playing badly and not know. How do you overcome that hurdle?
You have to trust yourself, and if you can't trust yourself, you have to be okay with just trial and error. Almost, that's the main problem. Kind of going back to what I said about guys don't know that they're not even implementing things correctly, that they think that they're extracting off of these solvers. Like, the landscape of the game is so immense and so intricate that, like, it's impossible to get feedback off of your environment if you're making the known decision. Like you're saying, there's just way too many variables, there's way too many moving parts at once, and you're not playing against a fixed computer, you're playing against another person, so there's the human factor to it. So it becomes really difficult to sort of know where you're at any one point. All you really have at the end of the day is, like, your large sample for the month, and you can gauge, did this month go well? But it's very hard to sort of see which part of the month went wrong. So I try to teach guys how to just learn more intuitively. I think it's one of the main things that saved me, is that if you stay there sort of just prophesizing and planning on how you're gonna fix your strategy, that tends to perpetuate itself, and I think it's kind of futile. I'd rather see guys get in there, start actually practicing and experimenting with stuff, see what works, see what doesn't, be honest with themselves about what they think they're able to implement, and just kind of take steps I think that's the most important thing, and it's the main thing that holds guys back is people aren't taking enough steps. Everybody's waiting for the next book to come out that's more accurate. In poker, you can't do that because that book's never going to come out. I mean, maybe years from now, but it's not like video poker in that sense where, there's a known answer. That's just not the case in poker. So there's a level of self-trust where you have to have it if you're going to scale your own growth. The guys that don't have it tend to stagnate and tend to be the more the regulars that sort of get phased out of the game.
Now, do you personally? I notice at Run It Once there are a lot of different pros that teach there, and they teach a lot of different games. You in particular, do you focus on cash games or tournaments, and what particular game do you focus on?
Almost exclusively Texas No Limit Texas Hold'em. I've played multi-table tournaments of that format, but I've never played stuff like Pot Limit Omaha. Like never even touched it. 2 cards is more than enough for me. I don't need 4.
And do you play cash or tournament and online or live?
Just cash. Mostly just cash. Online especially, like mostly just cash as of lately. And that's what I'm doing with the coaching.
So do you live outside the U.S. then?
Yeah, well, for most of the year I've been traveling Europe just to sort of dabble on PokerStars. Been on Bodog in Canada for some of it. But that's the thing. It's like once you get to a certain level and you're playing like, 5-10, a lot of your life becomes about making sure you're in the location where you can play on the sites that you need to. So it's interesting. There's a certain sacrifice I think that needs to be made for scaling your growth as a player who's heading toward high stakes no limit, because it really does matter what sites you're on.
Also, it seems if you really want to get good, you almost have to play online because you just can't get in enough hands playing live.
That too. Yeah. I mean, for your hourly rate, there's no comparison. I think you'd have to be playing something like a really soft 25-50 game to have the same hourly as you could get online playing, the mid-stakes game, but being able to play like 8 tables at a time.
Now, your courses are pretty high priced, and they also come with a money-back guarantee. That's an unusual combination. How has this worked for you?
It's worked out really well, actually. I wanted it to stand out as something that no one had really seen before in the industry as far as coaching. That product, well, my first product, up until that time I had been just coaching students one-on-one. But that product was basically the synthesis of me working with like 12 different guys at the beginning of this year and saying, you know what, all these guys actually have very similar things that are wrong with their game, and I could almost break it down to like 4 or 5 things. And with all the traveling and all the different time zones and scheduling on Skype, it was really sort of taking a toll on my schedule, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if I packaged this thing? Nobody seems to be doing it because it can get pirated. That's the main thing, and it has. But a lot of guys have responded from integrity and bought the product directly from me. And I feel like the refund has allowed people who are a little bit more hesitant to pull the trigger on expensive products to sort of like feel okay about it. And so, yeah, I think the incentives are in place in the way that they need to be.
I have to say, Bob, I don't find those two things in conflict at all. Most of the high-priced things like that I'm familiar with all offer a money-back guarantee. If you have a really good product, then you should be willing to guarantee it. So that doesn't surprise me at all. And I'm not endorsing the product. I have no idea. I haven't looked at Nick's course at all. So I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I would expect that.
I've been surprised. But when I did it, I didn't know what to expect. The product in the first month or 2 on the launch only had a 10% refund rate, and I felt pretty good about that. I don't know what a normal refund rate is for stuff of that price, but the other inspiring thing was that almost all the guys that bought pack 1 upgraded to the second pack. So it felt good to know that people are satisfied with an expensive purchase and that people are actually getting good value off of something that I was hoping would kind of solve an interesting problem in the community.
You seem to be using a somewhat Zen-like approach, meaning you need to work on getting your whole life in order to get your poker game working. Is that a fair statement?
Definitely fair. I think that when you begin to put an emphasis on balancing your perspectives in your career, especially like you come face to face with that very quickly in poker, it's very competitive and very personal. And when you really commit to that, there's no way for it not to trickle into your everyday life, because you begin to sort of observe every aspect of your decision-making process. So as I began to sort of like really only in the last year and a half, I think I've really been for the first time proud of my growth. But it was a very humbling process to get there, because I was constantly challenging my belief systems and realizing there was a lot of things that I used to believe in that weren't very true about how reality worked. So yeah, I think that if you're going to scale your growth in something like poker, which demands a high level of balance and humility, you're going to become a more Zen-like person. I guess that's the cliche. Really, I think it ends up being about functioning from a higher level of integrity with yourself, facing yourself very directly. And your connection and communication with other people, I think, starts to take shape from there, because you start to realize how much you are projecting on others. And I think it's important for your happiness to face these things.
Just out of curiosity, do you listen to Tim Ferriss?
Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of his podcasts.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I'm actually a big fan of Tim Ferriss. So for our listeners, you might check him out. He's the guy who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week and the 4-Hour Chef. And he has a lot of very interesting, sort of high-level people on his podcast. Successful people in all different areas.
Yeah, he's great.
Now, in poker, one of the things that many players try to do is to play mind games with their opponents in various ways. Now, using a Zen-like approach, I would think that would discourage you from doing some of these mind games with other people. Is that true?
I think that in my earlier 20s, I played much more from a compensational place, like trying to get in someone's head, trying to prove a point. I think what it's sort of grown into is more of just a sensitivity to the environment. Like once you don't have any sort of major conflicts going on in your own environment, like your own personal environment, and I mean like your emotional field, there's a natural sensitivity that develops to what the other person is going through. I think you begin to sense into that a little bit more objectively, even though that's sort of a strange way of putting it. I can sort of put people in certain paradigms after seeing how they behave for a little while, or watching their actions, seeing certain hands they show down. And it's not like a sure thing, but it's a better estimate than making no estimate at all. And I think that's where the trust comes in, is that that you're not always reading the person correctly, but more often than not, it's worth trying to make that guess. So yeah, I think that like being Zen or whatever, I think is just more about becoming sensitive to how your environment is coming at you and being able to calibrate sort of on the counterpunch.
And you get that even playing online where you can't see anybody.
Yeah, just stuff like, I mean, you can even go as far as saying that certain timing tells project certain things, and then hands that people show down. We have software that can show what stats people are running, so it's not all that hard to classify the big whales in a certain player profile fairly quickly. So it's sort of all that.
About a week ago on cdcgamingreports.com, there was a commentary by Nick Sortel where he interviewed Jason Mercier, who's an excellent, very successful poker player. And Jason was saying it's more like a business these days, where the guys are really watching what they eat, being an accountant with their expenses, and watching a whole bunch of things, and it's not like the good old days where poker players were hard drinking, coke sniffing guys with loads of $100 bills in their pocket who
We're
stuff like that.
150 pounds overweight.
So, do you concur with that? Do you think poker players are healthier today than they used to be? Or
I would say yes and no. Yeah, I think the good ones is the way to put it. There's definitely a very complacent part of the community that is still very much like that. And then there's the part of the community that's treating it more of like an entrepreneur type path. And I think that's like the guys that are really going to continue to have really good success and continue to scale their growth. Like I mentioned, if you're being smart about this, once you get to a certain tier, like if you're playing high stakes, like say you get to 5-10 online, it becomes pretty evident pretty quickly that it's in your best interest to start to diversify your bankroll. Like that alone requires a new level of responsibility. So it's like that, what's that like Spider-Man thing? With great power comes great responsibility. It's like as soon as you clear a certain threshold, you've got to sort of make that choice that if you're going to keep growing, you've got to take on more responsibility for how you're handling your money, how you're handling your body. If you're traveling, like that takes a toll on you too.
Your body in particular, because one of the things that I don't like about poker is that you sit in a chair for so many hours, which if you're not taking care of your body, that can be just devastating.
I mean, the sitting thing for me is ruthless. I went through sort of like a posture transformation at the beginning of this year, realizing that my posture was just awful. Putting attention on it daily, probably the hardest thing I've ever done, like harder than any weightlifting thing. And I have friends who have like upgraded to standing desks.
Yeah.
Like that's the new phase now, and I think I might upgrade to that if I ever stop traveling. But yeah, I would say that's a huge thing, and it takes a toll on you, like sitting for 8-10 hours a day. You can definitely feel that it's just not good for your body. Like I don't need to read any reports on it, I can feel it.
The Danny Negreanu post, when he exercises and that he's on a vegan diet and various other things to keep himself ready, is he that unusual, or do a lot of top players really pay attention to diet and health and stuff?
I think if he's doing that, he's probably in the top 1%. I've got to say I'm not consistent with it, or nearly as consistent as I would like. I recently just emailed a trainer, like an online trainer who trains people who travel a lot. And I was like, look, I clearly can't do this myself right now in terms of setting up a regimen that I can stick to, mainly because I'm just not educated well enough on it. Like I just don't have the skill set of being able to tell you what exactly I should eat, what my workout program should be. And I'm running a business at the same time. So it's like I made the decision to hire someone to basically tell me exactly what to do with my body. And I had anxiety almost writing that email because I know that's what I do with my students. Like when I take on students, I make sure they're all in. And that's what this guy's form was. He was like, if you're going to hire me as a trainer, you better be all in. And I'm writing this thing like, oh God, what am I signing up for here? But I'm pretty happy about it. Like I heard this, I don't know if you guys listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, like a huge media guy, but basically he said this thing that really resonated with me. He was talking about the same exact thing about his fitness, being an entrepreneur and not being able to handle it for himself. And he said he realized that the missing piece of the puzzle all along was that he needed to have accountability to another person in order to wake up every morning and do it. And so he hired a trainer to like basically travel everywhere with him because he has the money to do it. And he said that's been the difference for him, is accountability to another person.
Yeah, in video poker, casinos give everybody free food a lot as part of the slot club package. Mm-hmm. And so you see just a very high percentage of video poker with RFB belly. And most of us are quite a bit heavier now than when we started this profession. And a lot of us are struggling with it in various ways. Going to the gym and still not always being in what we want to be. But that's life, I guess.
It's definitely one of the hardest things. I really think that, like in any field, that in any part of your life where you're trying to get better, it's really, really hard to do it if you don't have somebody bridging you. Like, you can't expect people who aren't trained in fitness to go create their own regimen. Just like I can't expect somebody who's not already winning in poker to be able to plan his own learning curve. I feel like the best trainers, and that's what I'm looking for, like in a fitness coach, are the guys that can create a really simple context out of what you need to be doing, and you can almost follow it step by step. But you need to trust them. I think that's a really important part.
And do what they say. A lot of it's on the honor system.
Yeah, do what they say. I mean, I told my student today who asked me if he should quit his job, I said, look, I can tell you exactly what to do to beat, mid-stakes, no limit. But if you're going to apply yourself, I mean, that'll be it. That'll be what defines it. How much you're willing to actually put in, because it's going to cost you $100 to $200 of study time. But yeah, I want it to be. I want any sort of arena where people get training to be a sure thing. I want it to only have to depend on whether or not they're willing to put the work in. I feel like that's the way it should be.
Now, you are on runitonce.com. There's just a mess of sites that offer poker videos. Mess might not be the right word. There's a whole lot of them. What makes your site special?
That's a good question. Well, I think it starts from the top. I think that the guys who run it, like, those guys are like stand-up dudes. I think they come from a high level of integrity, and I think they've built the site from integrity. And I think they built it from a genuine offering to serve people. And I feel like that sort of like highlights it. That's been what highlights it all along. And they've scaled it from there pretty nicely. It's also been the first site that really housed a lot of the advanced theory discussion. So in that way, it sort of stands out. I think they have like the most alluring pros in the sense that like they're relatable pros. These are guys that were, kids that kids just like us that we all sort of grew up with. I know that like I'm sort of probably on the old end of the poker community now, which is weird to say. I'm only 29, but
God, hope I never get that old.
But for real, I mean, it's more relatable when a company starts and you've been following these guys all along. I just feel like that there's something to be said for that, and they were the first ones to really like claim themselves the elite too. I think that had something to do with it too. That they rivaled Card Runners or whatever, which was the other major one that time, and they basically said we're going to do it better, and we have the better coaches and we have the better model, and they did it.
Now, before we started today, you also said you had a Twitch site, and I said, well, go ahead and tell us about your Twitch site, and then tell us what a Twitch site is. There are some of us who Twitch site sounds like somebody would look for with a back problem.
So Twitch is basically a streaming channel where you can make a channel and then sort of do live podcasts similar to this, where I have my webcam on me, but it allows me to share my screen. And so what a lot of guys who do gaming stuff do, like a lot of poker players who play games, they'll share the screen and they'll play a session. The audience will be able to comment on the session and be sort of involved through chat. I'm taking questions from the chat on certain hands or just whatever comes up. And it's just a more interactive way to sort of connect with the audience, more or less.
When you do that, are you playing 8 tables, or because you're specifically doing it for your broadcast, you focus on 1 table?
I scale it back. I play 2 tables, and I usually try to make like a theme for each 2-hour podcast. I'm doing it 4 times a week lately, so I try to go in with like sort of a general direction, and then if the audience sort of catches on it and starts asking questions, that's great. If not, I end up just doing more discussion on the actual hands from the session.
And
But
do you record it and then you put it on the channel after editing it in some way and do the discussion, or is it all real time?
it's all live, which is, well, it's on a delay, because if it was real time, people who were playing with me could snipe my channel and know my hole cards.
Right,
so
right.
you put it on a 200-second delay, which is long enough to disguise the current hand that I have. And the audience is basically live there with you on the 200-second delay. But that's what makes it cool. And when guys use Twitch, they usually tend to keep to a schedule so that your audience always sort of knows when you're expected to be on. And then I do record it, and afterward I upload it, and it's there for anybody who missed it. A lot of guys, the time zones are weird.
Where do you upload it to?
It's right on the video manager of my channel. So if you go to Nick Howard Poker on Twitch, you'll see all the old videos, and you can watch them whenever you want.
I see.
It would, assuming you're playing No Limit Hold'em, there's a lot of hands that take longer than 3 minutes where people are thinking about it and other things. And a 200-second delay.
It's close, but it's actually faster than that. The amount of time they give you on PokerStars Zoom games, I think you get a 30-second clock and 15 seconds per street. I could be wrong about that, but I know that like 200 seconds is like cutting it close, but still okay. So yeah, somebody smarter than me has figured it out.
Online games, Bob, are not like the World Series of Poker where guys sit for 10 minutes and.
Yeah, but 3 minutes sounds pretty short if there's several players taking their full 30 seconds.
I'm sure if several players wanted to collude against me, they could find a way to take longer than 3 seconds or than 3 minutes just by passing the 30 seconds back and forth. Hasn't happened yet though.
It just has to happen once. When it's a $2,000 pot and he knows whether or not to make that call at the end, it's that could be useful.
Seems like an awful lot of work with multiple people for not a lot of return.
I mean, there's definitely collusion that happens on some of the sites in that way. Not with Twitch so much, but sites like Bovada, there's been some pretty decent evidence that when you sit with a lot of the tables that were playing three-handed, two of the guys were usually working together in a lot of different spots, which is alarming. But those sites are decently soft still, so it doesn't stop winning players from still going in there and playing. But it is kind of annoying to know that there's people who are angling like that. Like 3 guys at a table, and then you're playing the 2 friends, and they just raise you out of the pot, like that type of thing.
There are tools that PokerStars and the other places have to try to detect this and to punish it. Are those good? Do those tools work?
I think PokerStars does it the best, for sure. I think sort of the B-class sites, I'm not so sure that their tools are as good or that they even care as much. I hate to say it like that, but I think that the sites that aren't as like big kind of function from a lower level of integrity in the sense that they're just let more slide. But I think PokerStars has sort of established itself as a pretty credible force in being able to go about the security of the site really well.
Very good. We have been talking to Nick Howard, poker player, poker teacher, computer analyst. Thank you very much for being with us, Nick. We'll hope to catch you again someday.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was nice.
We're going to take a break now for a commercial message, and then I got a question for Richard when we come back.
The South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anybody else has. Now, through the end of October, they have 2 casino-wide progressives. The bigger one is from 10,000 to 25,000. The smaller one is from 1,000 to 2,500. We've talked about this all month. Double points in October is going to be Halloween, Monday, October 31st. Starting November 1st, the new promotion will be Smith's gift cards at half price. normally for 8,334 points. You can redeem that for $25 in cash. In November, for points earned and redeemed in November, you get a $50 Smith's gift card, limited to 10 gift cards per person. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play lots of games. You sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year. This allows you to get corrections on most of the games. The game of the week is Dream Card. Dream Card is a 10-coin per line game where periodically the fifth card turns into a dream card, which you can change into any card you want. It normally picks the best card for you, except for one rare case in bonus poker. It always picks the best one. But if you have a different card you'd rather pick, it's easy to do. It adds a bit EV-wise, does not require you to learn a new strategy, and it also increases the variance. You get a lot more royals, a lot more 4 aces, but it's 10 coins per line, and so you pay for it. Overall, if you have a choice between Dream Card and regular at the same pay schedule, Dream Card is a better bet.
All right, Richard, I got a question for you. I get lots of emails from people who want to take me out to lunch, usually on a comp meal, and pump my brain. And I'm not real excited about doing that with strangers. You must get those same kind of requests.
Yeah,
What do you...
Yeah, I do. I get them quite often, and actually, I think since we started the gamblingwithanedge.com page, it seems like I'm getting more and more of them. You know, in my own case, and I should add also, I just recently we've had Colin on from Blackjack Boot Camp, and they're doing a boot camp soon, and he had asked me if I wanted to come by the boot camp and give a little pep talk or something to the students or whatever. And, it's not that I don't like meeting people, but in my case, I would rather that less people know what I look like. So, because if somebody who is a player of any sort, even if it's a video poker player or a poker player, if they walk into a casino and see me playing a particular game, well, they're going to start asking, why is he playing that game? And that's not good for me. That's just not a positive expectation for me if that happens. Now, I mean, it's fine if I'm sitting at a blackjack table because they'll assume maybe I'm counting cards or something. But, if they see me at a particular slot machine or they see me playing another table game, well, it's gonna make them start thinking things I'd rather that they didn't even consider. So, to our listeners, it's not that I don't like you or that I'm, unwilling to be of help, but I would prefer to not, meet you for dinner. But thanks for the offer.
But we do respond to emails.
Yeah. And I respond on the Facebook page and Twitter and at, gamblingwithanedge.com when people comment on the shows. I try to respond there as well. So
very good. All right. Thank you, Richard. This has been interesting. We let Nick go a few minutes ago, but thank you, Nick. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.